Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Safer Communities Subcommittee on the 21st of March 2020. Good evening, members. Thank you for coming in. We've got a great attendance tonight. Many people who actually aren't on the committee, so really nice to see you, and thanks for taking the effort to come in. Does everybody have sight of an agenda? Yeah. Okay, then thank you very much indeed. So we will move swiftly on to the evacuation procedure. I see we've got no members of the public in attendance. Do I need to go through it, Clive, or can I take this?
Move it, we take through it.
Okay then, thank you much indeed, everybody. Apologies for absence for members of the Wales business. Do we have anybody apologising?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Farrow and substitute Councillor Hayden Phillips.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Phillips, you are welcome. Agenda item number 3, members. Does anybody have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests? No. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. I've just turned it on. I've turned it off very quickly. Feeding back from somebody else. Anybody else got the microphone? Okay, right. So moving on to item number 4, which is the minutes of the meeting of the subcommittee held on the 15th of November. Members, can we do them for accuracy to start with, please? So that's page 4 of 33 in your document pack. So page 4 of 33 and page 5 of 33. Can I read there a true and accurate record, please?
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Julie, do we have any matters arising? No, I don't see any. Okay, thank you very much indeed. That moves us on to agenda item 5, which is public participation. We don't have any members of the public in attendance in the room. Have we received any written questions? No, nothing received. Thank you much indeed. Item number 6. Right, so it's the update on the Northwestern Community Safety Partnership. Julie, are you going to take members through the report? Is it in the document pack?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Chair. Okay, I'll take it section by section, and then if there is specific questions as we go along, people can raise. So this is just a report to provide members with an update on the recent activities of the Northwestern Community Safety Partnership. I think under paragraph 3.3, I've just highlighted there that the subcommittee will note that the CSP priorities were agreed as part of the strategic assessment process, and previously that was reviewed annually. I just wanted to highlight that this will be done on a 4-year cycle. However, the first cycle will be 3 years. So I followed this up with the analyst, and it will actually take place in 2024. The reason I'm highlighting that is, in terms of this group, any new or emerging priorities will be brought to this meeting in Q3 in the future. So we'll have a look at any new or emerging priorities that are being addressed. It doesn't mean that any of our priorities will be removed. It might be that we add some in, or we will just reconsider them. So I was just really highlighting that for information. In terms of the performance data, so you've got Q3 performance report within your appendices. Just really want to take you through some of the data. And in general, what we're seeing around our first priority, which is violent crime, we're focused on knife crime, domestic abuse and alcohol-related violence. What we're seeing is a general increase in most of those areas. So we're seeing an increase in violent crime, knife crime, and there's issues around alcohol-related violence, and there's concern around sexual offences. So I'll just quickly take you through those. So the issue around violent crime is that it's below the 3-year average, and as you'll recall, the report that I brought to the last meeting, they've decided to do a 3-year average because of the pandemic, so we can get a clearer picture about our data and to make sure that it's more familiar with local circumstances. So around violent crime, we're seeing that it's below the 3-year average. However, it's higher than last year, and therefore what they're raising, what the analyst is raising here, is this might be a risk area for the community safety partnerships. It's something that we need to be mindful of. We're also seeing a small increase in domestic abuse. However, there is a concern around whether there is a lack of willingness to report domestic abuse or whether there is a genuine reduction in offences. Because what I'll come on to later on in the report is that we do see on the other side of people who experience domestic abuse and the recovery of that, we are still seeing an increase in the numbers of people coming through that service. So there is, again, some concern around whether these offences are being reported. Again, around knife crime, what I want to highlight there is Section 18 wounding offences. Again, this has been highlighted as a possible risk area and something we might want to look into in further details. In your performance data, what you'll see is that we have 13 Section 18 reports in quarter three, sorry. Yes, and again, in terms of alcohol-related violence, again, compared to last year, although quarter three involved national lockdown at the festive period, we're seeing that less than 10% of all violence involved alcohol in the borough this quarter. So there's a question mark on this because there is this is going up compared to last year. So again, we need to bear that in mind in terms of going forward. I think the biggest concern under priority 1 is sexual offences. Volumes of offences have more than doubled in quarter 3 compared to last year, with increases also compared to previous quarters. This suggests a possible emerging trend, and that's something that, again, that might be something we want to delve deeper into and have a look at what's actually happening there to try and understand the issue further. So that covers priority 1.
All right, so let's just go through that. And so the summary of the facts, isn't it, is that during COVID, we saw an increase in domestic violence across the whole borough. If members remember, we've always got a problem in that Atherstone ward is the key location for domestic violence, but all of the cases that are coming through are being properly managed, properly investigated, and supported by third sector organisations who are doing both victim support and now some degree of perpetrator engagement as well. We had a really good look at the knife crime, because the knife crime sounds as though it would be really alarming, doesn't it? And Alison Wiggin, our inspector, has been through every incident, and they are all domestic related, and they relate to the fact that when there are arguments in the home, the arguments take place in the kitchen, and the kitchen is full of violence. And in terms of crime categorisation, that therefore gets recorded as a knife crime. So what we're not seeing, and it's important we're really clear about it, is we're not seeing an incident of young people carrying knives on the streets in North Warwickshire. However, that is something we have to continue to be really sensitive to, because we know as soon as you drop into the borders of the West Midlands that there is a major issue with young people stabbing each other to death on a regular basis. Across the whole of the county, I think I'm right in saying there's been one significant incident in Leamington, but nothing anywhere near us. Members, what we didn't talk about at the last community safety meeting was we had some informal reporting from the PCSO about a problem at Hartshill School. However, once that was fully reviewed and investigated, it transpired actually that there weren't any grounds to have any concern. But I suppose, Julie, what I would say, and thank you for, is that it was a really good illustration of very immediate partnership working to come down, to explore the facts that had been reported, to do it really quickly, and to be able to demonstrate that there was no problem So with Arsenal School, we've left it at the moment with the local PCSOs just engaging with the school and talking. But for a moment, we thought there might be an issue, didn't we?
Yeah.
And again, I think it just proves the value, doesn't it, in community and particularly member sensitivity to issues that are being raised locally, and us being, if there is opportunity, us being super sensitive and responsive to anything where anybody might think there's a problem. Sexual offences, again, that's falling into the world of domestic abuse. There are no public places where there are any sexual offences, and of course you always need to be super conscious about public places such as swimming baths and all the rest of it if you're seeing an increase. But again, there's nothing within North Warwickshire where there is anywhere that as a community sector partnership we could do any engagement or we feel we have any problem. Everybody okay with that? Yeah, Joe?
Can I just comment on the knife crime? Because I had an alarming experience at a youth club recently, whereby the young people were telling me that they felt nervous because of things like heart attack. So it's really reassuring to hear that they are isolated and not on the streets, but very much from the young people's perspective, they were worried and reported that some of their friends, obviously no names mentioned, but some of their friends were starting to carry because they thought they had to protect themselves. And just that ability of knife crime to get out of hand based on a rumour or a perception. And I just think we need to be very, I don't know if there's any messaging that we can do to get the message out there to kind of convey some of that this evening, that the streets are not the places where the knife crime is increasing, than it is in domestic. And queries about how, if we are seeing, because obviously the domestic flags aren't, as you said, below the 3-year average, but if the knife crime that we're seeing the increases in and the sexual violence that we're seeing the increases in are domestic, then shouldn't we be seeing the domestic also rising? So is there a discrepancy between us? Is it just reporting? Are people going to the third-party agencies rather than the police, or what's going on with the data?
I mean, that is a concern. I think that is what we are concerned about, that either offences aren't being reported or there's work to be done to get messages out, because what we're is on the other side, that we're able to support people who experience domestic violence, and those numbers are going up. And I'll talk about that later, but at the moment we're not seeing the referrals being made with refuge. So we've got two services. We've got one with refuge, which is to try and provide support, information, advice to get people out into a safer situation. And then we've got the other side where we provide a counselling and therapeutic service. And so, like I say, the numbers are going up on the therapeutic service, but we're not seeing the referrals currently. So that is something that is puzzling us, and is something that we are doing more work on and looking to do a lot more social media campaigns. And we started drafting some stuff on that.
Okay, so I think it's a good point, isn't it? That we've got to be responsible. We've got to be conscious. The one thing that we know about young people carrying knives is they never, ever, ever intend to use them. But what happens is that they get into a confrontation. They pull the knife out to do a show, and before you know it, somebody's been stabbed. And that's the tragedy of young people and knives. So I do think we've got to be super, super sensitive to it. So if anybody sees that or hears things like that we have an emerging issue, let's get onto it. Because there are some things we can do in terms of positive interventions around community engagement, and where it gets more serious around introduction of preventive measures like knife archers going into school, etc. So I've got Kerry and then I've got Denise.
Just what you just said there, David. I do know the PCSOs, in Harts Hill, have been doing proactive things in the high schools by taking in the archers, and the kids have been walking through them, and it's making them all aware that if they're carrying, they are going to get picked up at some point, and it's just not worth having them on the persons either in school or down the street. I think the PCSOs are doing a positive job in the community as well.
Thank you for that. Denise?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points where it says domestic violence is only a small increase, that we're putting £10,000 behind it. and yet other sexual offences is more than doubled. So can I just ask you, Chair, what will we be doing about that one if we're putting £10,000 behind domestic abuse? How are we going to support that one as a borough? And the other point, which I asked last time as well, is how can we as a borough do something with the concerns of the children not attending school exclusions? Because if they're not in school, they're happily out there doing something. I'd just like to know as a borough how we will be addressing that.
Okay, so two issues then. A, about the general issues there about the increases in reported crime. First one is, bear in mind that the tables that you've got in front of you, particularly the tables in your document pack, are comparing first period of COVID lockdown with now. So what they are going to show is they are going to show an increase in incidents as we're no longer all restricted and everybody being at home and all the schools being closed. So there is a move forward. In terms of getting into the detail of other sexual offences, that's a huge grouped category. So there's nothing that's come through the partnership to break down the other category. So at the time being, I suppose, if we just note it and hold that one and watch it going forward. In terms of the £10,000, well, we've got the spends on the agenda to go through in a bit, where we'll update you on some of the proposals that we've got in going forward for the next 12 months. And the final point was about exclusions. And I think exclusions is really interesting, isn't it? Because there was part of the suggestion about the problem at school was around the volume of some of the young people being excluded and a lack of clarity between partner agencies about who was engaging with the excluded children and where they were going once they'd been excluded, and indeed across North Warwickshire, perhaps an issue with head teachers being quick to exclude. And obviously, you know that once you've excluded a child, they're at home and they're out of control. So they're out of control, they're out of supervision, that much is more or less properly. So you don't know where they are and what they're doing, particularly if both parents are working. So it was an interesting one at the moment. There's some things to pick up and keep going on. And part of the response around the Hartsell School was education services came in and were very proactive, weren't they?
I think, I mean, just to pick up on that point was that no weapons were actually found. So I think that's really important that we get that message across as well. So obviously that work will be ongoing at ad hoc times, but no weapons. When I followed it up, I was actually informed that no weapons were found.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, but again, it's that flexibility and it's that immediate response which is fundamentally important. So well done. Okay. Anybody else before we move on to the sorry, Dave.
No, sorry. It's lack of school attendance, really. Exclusions are a factor. There's no two ways about that. However, there are growing trends that are exaggerating this problem, essentially. Home teaching has become increasingly fashionable and has a number of concerns. One of those is that those children aren't necessarily being seen by any other agency, and that really does raise concerns. And of course, home teaching does often mean that these children are not under direct supervision in any sense and are doing what they like. Schools, by and large, in my experience, do not take exclusions lightly. They do not want to exclude pupils. But of course, there comes a point where staff and indeed other pupils sometimes very definitely need a break. And actually, if you were to see some of the behaviour that leads to exclusions, you would be amazed at the tolerance of the children around them and the teachers who try to teach them. There is that problem. Lockdown hasn't helped this because a lot of kids were not in school during lockdown and then came back to school after a long period of not being in school and have not really got the behavioural things right again. And in a sense, it's a bit of a perfect storm at the moment. Don't know quite what the answer is, but there are a lot of problems there. I have huge concerns about the increasing popularity of homeschooling. I think there are real and grave issues potentially there. And that is putting a lot of kids essentially on the streets, clearly. Yeah, what there isn't is adequate provision now in the system for children who exhibit very, very challenging and very difficult behaviour. The actual sort of provision for children in that category is very, very small, and that doesn't happen. So I'm not answering any problem.
No, it's just a general statement, isn't it? Recognising the contribution to the schools, because they are, particularly in some of the younger ages, they've got some real challenges, haven't they, with children that have started education, fallen out of education and having to be reintroduced again when they're a little bit older. So yeah. Joe?
I just want to come back on school exclusions, because this is quite a big thing. Arlie at the moment, who's primarily led from Hartshill and Nuneaton Academy, are our two main schools. And there seems to have been, since lockdown, a sharp uptake in using exclusions as a short-term measure. So we are regularly seeing children almost en masse sent home. And these are often children who are school refusers. So the parents have already battled to get them into school that day. Yeah. And then they arrive home in a taxi at 11 o'clock with 4 other taxis with their mates in it. And it's obviously then, you know, we've had significant kind of unsocial behaviour in the park and egging and kicking doors and various other things in the middle of the day when these children have been sent home. And sometimes the parents aren't even aware they've been sent home, they're at work or can't be contacted, and children just arrive home. You know, and there's nobody there, as you say, to kind of govern that behaviour. They've obviously already come out of a conflict situation at school, so they're not necessarily regulating as well as they could be doing. So then they kind of send cross children who've already had negative experiences home in a taxi and leave them on the streets, unable to get into their homes or access any parental supervision. And I do think that there's obviously a gap there that's a safeguarding concern from the children's point of view. But for the rest of the community, it's quite a negative experience to see those kids coming home. And then for the parents that are desperately trying to get them into school, to then have them sent home. So the kids are saying, well, what's the point of me going in? Because I'm going to get sent home at 10:30 and then I'll be excluded again. So there is definitely a breakdown in this system that we're not supporting children. I don't believe that it can't be a positive experience in the school, because the paperwork alone, let alone the actual kind of negativity that the children then going back in with, and for the parents and the communities, there is definitely a breakdown in this system that is leaving children exposed and residents exposed to antisocial behaviour.
Okay, well, they're really good points that are made, aren't they? And particularly the midday the working weekday antisocial behaviour during the daytime is one for us just to watch, and then just not to forget there might be a link. So we note it and we move forward. Brian, I'll give you the last comment on education and exclusions.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it was a bit more. I'm worried as we seem as if we're going into a third year of exam disruption with children. And that's wandering off the topic a little bit, but as regards attendance, I've got one granddaughter. She's 14, and she's a clever lass, but she's a little bit of a scallywag. And she said to me, she said, as long as I'm seen on the screen by a teacher at some time, that's it. I've got my day in. Whereas if she skived off in the afternoon at school, that would count as an absence. I have no answer. Right,
you broadcast that to the whole of North Warwickshire. Every child in North Warwickshire knows how to do it.
I withdraw that remark, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's close that one down. Interesting points. Julie, acoustic crime, which, as we know, is house burglary, car theft, robbery.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so priority 2 and 3, like Councillor Riley just said, so is around serious acquisitive crime, focused on residential burglary. vehicle crime and personal robbery, and priority 3 is around rural crime. I mean, on a positive note, these are much lower than in previous years, so it's good to be talking about some positive statistics. So, and I'll come on to some of the things that we are doing when we do see spikes, and we're trying to be very reactive or proactive. Should we see like vehicle crime issues within the borough? So I'll talk about that in a little bit. And again, in terms of rural crime, again, much lower than we've seen. So this is all a positive story in terms of the crime statistics around those 2 priority areas. Are you happy for me to go on to priority 4? Yeah.
Yes, please, don't. If we've got anything to say about house burglary or vehicles? No? Okay.
Talk about the actual project.
Yeah.
So in terms of priority 4, road safety, again, another good news stories. We've had no fatal killed or seriously injured in quarter 3. So again, this is a nice positive message we can share on this one occasion around that. So after we had a spike, our 3-year average is I think it's low, isn't it? Oh, it's similar to what we've seen in previous quarter 3. However, we've had no fatal incident in this physical quarter. So that's a positive message.
That's to Christmas, because we have had one since.
Okay.
Yeah, since Christmas.
So based on the statistics that I've got from the analysts. Perception of crime. This is information that we've got from Safer Streets data. So I just wanted to just quickly highlight the kind of areas that were highlighted. So in terms of what people said about what makes people feel safe, it's about most of the reports came from the northern part of the area, badly lit areas, verbal harassment, and issues around evenings and overnight. And in terms of the locations that we've got the information from, it's mainly Newton, Regis, Wharton, Ward, Polesworth, Jordan, and Coles Hill, and /Water Alton. So there's a lot more work going on around safer streets. They have just announced some further funding, and we will look at that further funding again to see if we can apply for another project. So then, in terms of reoffending rates, these are continuing to increase, and this is again something that we might want to look into as it could become an emerging issue for us as a district. So it says here, despite a peak in the number of reoffences per reoffender in 2008, the overall trend shows that those who do reoffend in the borough are less likely to commit more reoffences than the county average. But this is being highlighted as an emerging trend. So the analysts raised that with us. And again, I think exploitation, we're not seeing a huge number of referrals or identification of issues going on. But again, there's this query over, do we need to be doing more to raise awareness to this issue? So do we not hear about it because we're not doing enough raising awareness? So we just need to be mindful of that issue so we can look at that going forward, and we're working with Warwickshire County Council on that. You've talked about social exclusions. And then in terms of substance misuse, we've not seen any referrals to Compass. In terms of domestic abuse, like I say, we've already talked about this, but there's an issue between initial point of contact and supporting the individual once they've been at the hands of domestic abuse. So we do need to keep our eye on this issue and move forward on that one. In terms of hate crime, again, it says here, after the worrying high volumes of hate crime in the borough and indeed across the county during quarters 1 and 2, volumes have now reduced in quarter 3. So again, this is a positive, message to share with you all. They do say, however, they remain at high levels than in the 3-year average. So we just need to be mindful of that and continue with the good work that we're doing around hate crime.
We've asked for a bit of analysis, haven't we, just to explain that a little bit further, because one of the things that we were interested in was we've been seeing a high recording of hate crime incidents, which are police officers who are abused in the course of their duty. So they get recorded as hate crimes, and we've just asked the analysts just to pull out those offences from general issues of hate crime within our community to make sure that we're on top of everything. We haven't had the results for that yet, have we? But I'm just wondering whether that increase is down to police officers in the execution of their duty. They'll obviously have the right not to be abused on hate, but it's a bit different, isn't it?
And then in terms of other updates, it was really just to raise.
Could you go back to the ASB?
Oh, sorry.
So just to say the ASB in Coleshill and Waterorton is an interesting one. It ran up to the end of the good weather, which was around October this year, and what we were seeing was a change in behaviours of young people, where lots of young people were coming out and congregating in the local parks. In Waterorton, that extended to some boisterous behaviour. No one was actually hurt, but some people got incredibly drunk. And in Coleshill, a little bit more boisterous, where there was congregations and there was damage to things like flower beds and all the rest of it. But I think it's one for us just to be sensitive to as we move into hopefully a period of fantastic weather starting next week or this week even. And again, it's just that the social change, isn't it? Where after lockdown, after having been away, suddenly, for the first time in the period that I've represented Waterorton, there were just large groups of young people together, which is fantastic, isn't it? You know, but an interesting phenomenon because it wasn't happening before COVID. So if anybody does have any issues with light behaviours in their wards, then please flag it up and we'll sit down and we'll think about it, because there are a couple of outreach ASB projects that are happening across North Wales to get, you know, in terms of youth activities and young people's activities. We can certainly look to see if we can do anything to negotiate provision in other areas. Sorry, Julie.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. No, just very quickly on the personal ASB, we are seeing again increases. So like Councillor Riley has just said, we are definitely seeing an increase with young people across a number of parishes, and it does seem to be a lot of possibly hanging around on the streets, knocking on doors, egging, you know, abuse at times. So it is something we're very mindful of, and it is something we are discussing at problem solving meetings as well. So it's just to make people aware that we are starting to see a bit of an issue emerging across the borough at the moment around that. And I know some councils are very much aware of that within their own parishes, but we are looking at it and we are discussing it regularly in meetings to look at what we can do to address some of those concerns.
Okay, brilliant. Joe?
Just on the ASB, we've obviously seen an increase. I think every time I see these figures, it's quite clear that what I see happening, just in my own little, in Newham itself, let alone in Arley Whisker, what I see happening is never reflects in these figures. And it's how we kind of enable people to say, I don't deserve to live this way. I shouldn't have to put up with being egged or having a door kicked. And, you know, whereas people are quite happy to complain on Facebook, they don't somehow feel that it's worthy of taking to the police and reporting. And I just think that if there was anything we could do to actually promote that and say, you know, I understand you don't want to get people in trouble, you don't want to escalate the situation, you don't want repercussions from this, but it's not okay. And I think the other thing that really concerns me around it is the kind of the grooming of younger children. So you'll have 2 or 3 older children that will then encourage or bully other children into acting. And then it kind of sets the precedent to be kind of cycling on. And I think while I've lived in the village, we've seen, you know, 2 or 3 kind of generations of children kind of passing on their skills, as it were, to younger people. And it's how we break that cycle and we stop it being a culture of being acceptable.
I think it is, isn't it? I mean, let's got you there, John. Let's be sensitive to it. Let's think about it. And while these instances can be reported to the police, they can also be dealt with locally as well without a need for police engagement. If we can do some problem solving, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the fact that Addiston Central Ward has been highlighted. Is there particular places within that ward that have been highlighted as to where this ASB is going on?
there is particular wards that they're looking at. I can probably provide further details afterwards, but certainly through Safer Streets as well, they're they're looking at a number of different things, whether it be lighting, whether it be about looking at landscaping, but there is a particular area.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got Major and then I've got Nick.
Right, yeah, under all these lists, there doesn't seem to be any drug crime or drug use. You got substance misuse, but there've been no referrals to Compass. Is Compass a drug? But there's been nothing, no referrals at all.
I mean, just to come back on that, I mean, it's not saying that issue doesn't exist, because clearly it does exist. And I don't want to, when I talk about some of the work that we're doing, obviously county lines is still something that we've got to be mindful of nationally and on our county-wide perspective. But I think because of the kind of targeted work that's been done in the past and the way in which people react quite quickly to this, that at the moment it's not such a big issue within North Yorkshire. I'm not saying for one moment it doesn't exist. It will be there, but we are quite, the police and the partner organisations are quite good at responding, like we are as a borough council, in terms of our tenants, and we'll get closure orders in place and remove those people if they're yeah. So we're quite reactive in terms of that agenda, but it won't ever go away. It will exist. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, that there are 3 routes into drug treatment. One is self-referral, 2 is through the criminal justice system, and then 3 is through assertive outreach, where the drug treatment agencies come out and go on the street and go to the key locations. And obviously, you all know as well as I do that drugs are now being openly sold on the streets in North Yorkshire. You can see it. I see it quite frequently when I'm driving here from down past the golf course. So we've challenged Compass about how much assertive outreach is being done by the drug company, by the drug treatment agency. We're waiting for some feedback from them. We've also challenged the Police and Crime Commissioner around drug testing on arrest, and Warwickshire Police are reviewing their force policy now as to whether there should be drug testing certain crime categories, or indeed all crime categories on arrest, to find out whether there's correlation between criminal behaviour and drug addiction. And one of the old things, I mean, it's just a bit of interest, but there are certain drug types like crack, where crack will historically feature in 70% of people arrested for on-street violence. So I'm pleased that the PCC is now reviewing it and coming back again. But you're quite right, Major, it doesn't make sense that we know that we've got a drug problem in North Warwickshire, and we're just not seeing people into the treatment agencies, which either says the treatment agencies and the routes in aren't working properly, or there's no need for it. Interesting times. Yeah, Joe?
Can I ask about the multi-agency licensing group that used to be quite active in? And I believe the last thing that we heard from them was they tested bathrooms in pubs, and found 90% of all pubs had some level of Class A drugs and what? Because they don't seem to be active or
Well, you mean the licensing committee and the testing of the toilets? And
multi-agency licensing and something.
Yeah, so that's where we've got the police, the fire service, colleagues from environmental health going into pubs, swabbing things like the toilets and moving forward. And the whole idea being that they start talking to the licensee about how they manage their premises. The last one, Joe, was just before COVID, I'm aware of, where they went into the pubs in Coleshill, and every one of the pub toilets in Coleshill that got cocaine failed the swab tests. And we did start there, reinitiating work to start saying to the licensees, right, well, you either sort this out or you lose your license. But then COVID came along. Julie?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to say that I think during the pandemic they didn't actually meet. And I think their first meeting took place in November. And so they're back up and running. And so hopefully we'll see some more proactive work taking place.
And the solution is always joint working, isn't it? It's always about making sure that the licensees exercise their duty of care to the management of their customers and the management of their process. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just quickly, a theme that sort of underpins quite a few of the conversations that the residents in Polesworth West and other parts of Polesworth and Birchmoor is the lighting, the street lighting. That always seems to come up as a theme where they say it feeds into the fear of crime that we've all talked about tonight, and the perception of crime where it's dark areas. They get very reticent about, because the police advice is usually stick to well-lit areas, you know, park your car in a well-lit area, don't walk through over dark areas. And I think that's where that comes from. It's difficult to see that the advice that they're taking from the police is consistent with the messages about the street lighting. I think that's what seems to come out for me. And then obviously for criminals, if you're going to commit crime, you would prefer a dark area, so you're not going to get seen. And obviously everybody's wearing masks nowadays as well, just in case. I suppose that doesn't help as well. So yeah, it's just an observation really that does seem to feed into the fear of perception of crime.
And I think you're spot on, aren't you? We're going to talk about perceptions of safety in a bit on the agenda. Since we've last met, there has been an interesting development with street lighting, and that is that Hartshill Parish Council have voted to pay for the park night street lights that were turned off to be turned on. So at the parish council's expense, we now know that Hartshill Parish has all the street lights on all the time. If you remember, every parish has got a range of street lights on every ward. Some are on all the time, some of them are turned off, and when you start looking into that, the locations of where the park nights are quite interesting actually, because they tend to be in the urban areas where, as you quite rightly say, Michael, you pitch black. You know, I mean, Denise constantly talks about people going to work first thing in the morning on early shifts and going to work in the winter in the pitch black. Yeah. And it, you know, it doesn't do confidence good, does it? So I think the first thing for us to note is we've now got an eye on Hartshill to see what happens. We did try and do a little bit of a pilot study to baseline people's perceptions before the lights were turned on, and then in 12 months' time to baseline them, but we weren't quick enough. So the county council once said agreed to do it. They were very quick, but you will remember that just before COVID, there was £80,000 put into North Warwickshire Borough Council's budget to pay for every street light in North Warwickshire to be turned on, and the county council didn't accept that £80,000 and stood by their policy. So I think it remains an issue, doesn't it? Not that I wish to politicise it in any way whatsoever, but I think everybody's on the same page, effectively, that we need to have the street lights on if we want to majorly impact on people's perceptions. You know, in my own ward, there's a community, a street right on the border with Birmingham, and they are forever experiencing prowlers in the dark. You know, it's people just coming across the motorway and having a good mooch and going back again. You know, right? Any more on street lights?
No, I just wanted to make one comment with regard to hard to let properties in the area. I've got a resident at the moment needing a bigger accommodation, so they're on the list to be moved, and they're being offered. It's a young couple with 3 children under 10. They're being offered hard to let properties because they're considered, well, you know, if you're desperate, you'll go kind of thing. And they went to the Pear Tree Estate in Kingsbury, and the drug use was open and obvious.
Yes.
Very bad. And she said she had 3 children under 10, and the thought of living where it wasn't even hidden was horrifying. And when I spoke to housing, the response was, well, I said she hasn't even requested Kingsbury as an area to move to. She's given quite a few areas, but Kingsbury wasn't on the list. Why have you offered her a property in Kingsbury, and why hard to let? And she said, well, we offer everybody hard to let properties because we hope they'll take them, whether they want them or not.
You know, if you're that desperate, you'll take them. It's a 3-bed. But would you want your 3 young children under 10 coming out of the door every morning or coming in every evening after school to come face to face with drug use? And it just seemed to be that the housing Mandy Machine that I spoke to, it was like, well, you know, it's just the way it is kind of thing.
Okay,
I thought
well,
it
we
was
might
quite a
have.
shocking attitude to have.
All right, well, let's note it, and then let's revisit that when we talk on the agenda about the Safer Communities Partnership Officer that we're talking about commissioning over the next 12 months. And I think examples like that are really the sort of thing that we should be thinking if we do have a deployable resource to do above and beyond people's day jobs and community safety, then clearly that's something we should be deploying them into and having a chat about the options, as we've already said, about bringing out assertive outreach and liaising with the schools, etc., etc. But a great example. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? No? Julie?
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to go through, again, in your papers and in your appendices, you've got a copy of the partnership plan, but I just wanted to pull out a few of the key things that we do around the CSP work to address some of these kind of issues. So as you'll be aware, Alison Wiggins, the inspector, police inspector, chairs our problem solving meetings. And I just wanted to give you a feel for what we're actually looking at the current time. So some of the latest issues that we've been looking at is Addison Road, Hartshill, along with rising levels of bike nuisances, along with fly tipping, and developing plans to address youth-related antisocial behaviour, which we talked about tonight. And it says there in the report, particularly in Hartshill and Arley at the moment. However, again, these issues in Colston and some other areas are emerging that we're trying to get on top of, and we're trying to look at times when these things are happening as well. So just to make you aware, as a problem-solving meeting, these are the kind of things that we're regularly looking at and discussing. How can we find a problem-solving plan to address them? We've talked about drugs, and one of the things is before my time, there was Operation, and did you say Hilarity? Is that how you say it? In this area, and that's no longer in place. However, again, you know, we have been looking at Hartshill, following up on some of the issues that have been highlighted, and we have been supporting the County Lines Intensification Week, which was a campaign, and we tried to get information out about county lines and the issues surrounding that. So we put posters out and stickers out with the aim that they would be displayed in schools and local areas. So hopefully we did get those messages out within as part of that campaigns week, but that's an ongoing issue and we need to continue with that as we go forward. Particularly around road safety, we have Operation Array that has now closed, but since that project's closed, we started to see more and more issues around bike nuisances, and possibly going into the summer months we might see even more. So again, through joint partnership working, we've had a couple of events in the last couple of weeks, and we've just had one this weekend again where they've been out. So I haven't actually got the data in terms of the outcome of this weekend's event, but they have been highly successful when they've gone out, and so it'll be good to get some figures on what's happened. So that's around road safety. Again, we're progressing street cruising in Junction, and I think that's been on hold for the last kind of 12-18 months, but that's back on following a judgment on a national case that's been overturned, and we're now progressing that and moving forward. The other thing that I can't recall if I actually raised at the last meeting, but one of the things we've asked is for the county analysts to look at all of our crime data in North Warwickshire and to produce a seasonal trends, like a 12-month seasonal trend. So the idea behind that is that we can do more proactive engagement events. So that we know we see a spike during certain months in a certain location, and we can try and do some like vehicle crime events or fly tipping and stuff. So the idea is that we can become a bit more proactive in what we're doing. I just wanted to highlight as well, we've done some we saw 2 spikes around issues with vehicle crime. So we held an event in Wharton and Ostray, and then a weekend event in Polesworth just recently, and that was specifically to target issues that were starting to emerge in those areas. To then go on to fly tipping, Richard, did you want to come in on the fly tipping work?
Yeah, just very, very brief, share with your indulgence, and apologies for not getting the regular report on flight tipping. We've had just resource issues that we haven't been able to prepare that this time. But just to give you some of the facts and figures that we normally give to this committee. So last time when we reported to you, there'd been 447 recorded incidents in the 6 months from April to September. Now, this period covers a slightly shorter period of only 4 months. From October to January of this year, we recorded 378 cases over that 4 months. So that's shown a 27% rise in fly tipping cases over the previous 6 month period, like for like, obviously. But actually a 16% fall over the same period last year. So although numbers of fly tips have worsened since the last time we reported it, and comparing over the same period last year, cases have fallen slightly. So just a little bit of background on that. And to give you some of the detail of the sort of stuff we're picking up, about just over 58% of the waste is household waste of one form or another, which probably won't surprise you. The usual mix of garden waste, white goods, tyres, that sort of thing. Quite a number of cases, as usual, of sort of construction and demolition waste. And quite an interesting figure, over 10% of the fly tip waste we pick up is cannabis related. So that's quite interesting as well. We haven't, because of other priorities, done as much on camera deployment and CCTV monitoring as we'd like, but we'd like to start picking that back up again now, because we obviously think that's a key area that we need to take some action on. There's already been some mention made of the Safe Warwickshire officer, obviously fly tipping a key element for them to tackle if that goes forward. And I think we spoke last time about the scrap campaign. We're keen to get moving on that as well to promote fly tipping as an issue and to raise awareness of the issues on it. So obviously, I don't know, Julie, if you've got anything to add, but if obviously anybody's got any questions, we'll do our best to answer them, Chair.
Okay, fly tipping, the scourge of North Warwickshire, but beamed out very well. We've got some questions. We've got Dave and then Denise.
If I may go back to the road safety discussion very briefly. I don't know how the people see it. One of the things that seems to be making quite an impact in Polesworth at the moment is the dreaded e-scooter issue. I'm seeing, there's increasing numbers of them. I think there's a case of, horses and stable doors. We're not going to stop e-scooters. I don't think they're just too attractive for the people that use them. But I do think we possibly need something in the way of significant education about e-scooters. I think the time before we actually have our first fatality is not going to be too long, to be honest. So, that's just an incredibly sort of not essentially irresponsible behaviour, because they just don't have the sense of responsibility about it. They don't have the knowledge or whatever. Everything they learn on their bicycles just seems to go out the window, and an e-scooter, and the potential for collisions on pavements and the potential for people being killed as they ride them on the roads is I think enormous. And I suspect what we need is really a big education campaign about e-scooters.
Dave, I think it's a really good point. Maybe we should, Julie, if we could pick it up and then bring it back to the next meeting, we'll have a word with the County Council Road Safety Partnership about what the county are proposing, because as Dave quite rightly says, people are driving at speed on the pavement. When they are riding the scooters on the road, there's no personal protective equipment being worn in terms of helmets or the rest of it. And as you say, there's evidence elsewhere in the country of fatalities. The other link to community safety is we know that these scooters are a really attractive target for robberies, street robbery. So So let's revisit it and we'll bring that back as an action under matters arising for the next meeting then.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, good one. It's a good one. I've got Denise and then I've got Brian.
Yeah, going back to the fly tipping, that Richard's mentioned the scrapping, because I think we're seeing more fridges and freezers and bits of metal dumped, and I really don't think it's got out there yet to our residents that they're fly tipping, even if they put it on the footpath outside their house. I mentioned it to somebody near where I live, and they said, oh, it won't be out here long, the scrap man will come and pick it up. Well, they didn't. The scrap man took the bits out that they wanted, and the machine was still there like 2 days later. So I did, say to them, well, I'm sorry, if you don't take it in, then you will be reported because it's fly tipping. And I still don't think it's got out there that they think, oh, by putting it on the end of the drive or putting it on the pavement, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair.
It's a good point, Richard. Any views?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's back to that household duty of care stuff that we've spoken about previously, and it covers a wide range of things. It's not just about getting somebody to take stuff away who's licensed to do it. It's about the fact that you have responsibility for the waste that your household generates, and you're responsible for it being gotten rid of properly. And as Councillor Cleese says, sticking it at the end of your driveway in the hope that somebody will take it away and it's still being there a week and a half later is not a responsible way of getting rid of waste. So yeah, we will absolutely add that to the promotion and publicity that we do.
Yeah, I've got Clive and then Brian. Clive.
Just on that point, I'd say it's a subtle distinction, but leaving it on the end of the drive wouldn't necessarily amount to fly tipping itself. On the highway you could, but we still have other powers, but to deal with accumulations on the owner's land. Of course, it's the same issue that people then take it, it's where it ends up. So it is all related, and it does go back to Richard's point on the duty of care, but there are other powers we could look at using, even if it stays on their land in the short term. So that's something we can follow up and maybe do a bit of advice for a future meeting.
Yeah, well, let's do that. A, because it's unsightly, B, because of the fact that obviously these guys are collecting this waste in the night, and when they're collecting the waste, they're having a bloody good mooch around everywhere else. So you don't know who's in the community, you don't know where they're going. When they are challenged, they're claiming a legitimate purpose. Gone are the days of the scrap man coming around and blowing his big horn, everybody knowing and bringing it out for him. So I think it's a really good one. And I'm still sore about the fact that Marston's Christmas tree was stolen by the bloke that had the scrap. He was caught on video, the whole tree and all. This was 4 years ago now. I really am going back, but he had the tree and all the decorations and everything. And the police never looked him up.
Let it go.
I can't.
It's
Right.
time expired now.
Yeah.
Chairman, the points that Denise was bringing up, I've noticed over the years, I've got a fairly broad view from my programme. It depends on the price of scrap metal. When scrap metal's high, wow, they get them. A chap from Baxley fitted me a new boiler, and he put the old one on the bottom of the drive, and it was gone in 10 minutes. Oh, he said that was quick. He said it's normally half an hour. I thought that's it. But now to go.
Don't promote it, Brian.
Yes, to go back to the scooters, I strongly concur. Kingsbury, the problem's going down a bit. The police told the Parish Council at the last but one meeting that they were quietly mopping them up. But actually, what I noticed the other day in hairdressers in Anderston, there was one for sale, a new one, £299. I had no idea what they cost. I couldn't afford it, so I didn't. But it did at least say, what the law was, and you couldn't go and ride it on the street. Well, that was just covering themselves, I imagine. But it's not just scooters. There's one comes past my house nearly every day, and it's not a scooter. It's an electric motorbike. It's got no pedals. It's got footrests. It's even got a pillion seat, and it goes into the water park. I don't know. I travel on the continent a bit. Well, they're everywhere, and they don't seem to have any location. You'll see one come across from the fast lane on the road over the cycle footway onto the pavement, and then only when they're finished with it, they lay it across the street. They don't put it in a docking station.
And that's it, isn't it? It's the speed that they're travelling at. Right, so points well made. I've got Aidan and then I've got Joe.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Just to support the thing about, I think people leaving things on the drive with the campaign against that. I mean, it's not only just, I just think it's so irresponsible because you're encouraging people to come on your driveway. So you know that means you can no longer use your property, your drive as somewhere to store it. Say if you're doing some work in your house, you're taking your old radiators.
Where do you put your settees these days? Somebody comes and cleans it away.
It occurred to me, I mean, I got an old vintage motorbike and I took apart a few years ago, and I was putting it out on the drive, and it was a nice sunny day, so I laid it out in bits, you know, and I took up most of the sort of carport area, and I thought I'd have a cup of coffee, and I heard the guy was saying, you know, they're still using the trumpet then, and I've got to sit over and guard it because if they'd seen it on the drive, they'd just been down and thought it was theirs. And just because it's on your drive and it's there, it's not. It's they seem to believe it's theirs. And like I say, it's like I say, you said it's stealing, isn't it? I mean, they've got no right to be there, and we ought to be encouraging people to do it, because the people who moan about it, the people who do the same thing, you've seen little bits of stuff all over drives, and it encourages them to. Then people moan about stuff going missing that shouldn't go missing. You know, and to be fair to the guys who are encouraged to stop, they don't know, do they, in the end, what's being left out. I mean, they shouldn't be picking it up, but we encourage them to do it. And we ought to be encouraging people to take it down the tip or get a responsible person to take it.
We had two bikes stolen recently in Atherstone, 2 children's bikes taken off of a drive in Atherstone. And they've raised one of the Facebook pages. All of the members raised the money to buy the 2 kids 2 new bikes.
Well, I can imagine the time when my grandchildren are older to come around and dump their bikes on my drive. Yeah, I'll have to go and get them in if they before you know, because they'll be vulnerable. Just as children, as I used to do, just dump it on the drive.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't mention it. Is the bike still under the carport in bits or in a box in the back of the car?
I saw it.
That's a sign that we've been going for an hour now and his attention's wandering. Okay, right, listen. Good point well made. I've got you there, Joe. You can have the last comment. But, you know, let's revisit it, because it is an immediate impact. It is a crime risk. Joe?
It's only a small issue, but the service roads in Arley are obviously unadopted land. So as a legal point, technically it's not fly tipping for people to fill the service roads.
It's any land in the open net, so it can still be, as long as there's not consent of the landowner to put it there. So there's no action, but obviously without knowing the particular location and so forth or what incidents, I don't know what response there's been, but it might be that people don't believe it to be the case and therefore perhaps don't report it when it is something that can be reported.
We seem to have a forest of fridges down the service roads at the back of the houses, which nobody takes responsibility for, nobody admits to ownership of. And we talked about having a community event whereby we've actually found a licensed collector who will collect them for a fee. We said we can have a community clear out, but then we end up with the issue that we may then be encouraging people to not dispose of their things and think, well, if I leave it out, then somebody will organise a collection. So we do have, there was, I think at one time we counted about 20 fridges down the service roads of Arley that have just been dumped there. And
wow.
Sprouting quite open.
Okay. Richard, community clearances, are there any projects where we do things like that, where we go in and...
There certainly have been in the past, Chair. It's not unheard of. It's usually a question of cost with these things, but certainly we can talk to our bulky waste collection provider. I mean, other councils have picked up the point that actually these days the scrap metal price is such that only certain parts of things like fridges are worth taking. You know, so, you know, copper piping and wiring and that sort of thing, yes. Refrigerant, no. So they'll rip the innards out, they'll leave the carcass behind, and you've got, you know, a problem that there's no value in it for our contractors to pick up as well. It's only cost, but we can certainly look at that. I'm not averse to sort of targeted campaigns for that sort of thing. So yeah, let us talk to our contractors and we'll talk to local members. We can certainly talk to Jerry. We'll see if there's something we can, particularly in that elsewhere.
All right, mate. Well, when we revisit the community safety officer, let's just think about some coordinated campaigns maybe that we could do in communities and have a pre-formatted campaign that could drop to a parish near you at any point. Major, last comment.
Yeah. Are the tips still appointment only? The refuge tips, do you still have to book in?
Yeah.
Or will they ever go back to, you can just drive in?
Chair, I can answer that. Certainly, they're obviously run by the county council. We had a discussion at this Warwickshire Waste Partnership, I think it was last week. What the county said is that there are more slots open than they had before, so they've made more slots available. They're also looking at increasing the number of slots still further because the COVID restrictions are such, of course, now that they're not going to have the spacing that they had before at the sites. We should open even more slots. Booking is available not just on the day, but almost immediately now. You can book within 15 minutes of slots. So you can't just go in, but you can book from a phone or from phoning them up or on the website and go immediately if there are slots available. So that's made a difference. And their view, following some customer satisfaction surveys they've been doing, is that more people than not are in favour of keeping the booking system. So at the moment, the county is saying there are no plans to change what's there at the moment, i.e. some form of booking, but of course they keep it under review. But that's the situation is at the moment, Chair.
Thanks, Mark.
Maybe we could advertise that there's more slots, so there won't be so many fly tipping or fridges or freezers left that they can take.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, Richard, I'm conscious of the fact that Councillor Andy Wright constantly finds fresh fly tipping outside the gates. As part of his daily walk, he's always finding interesting bits and pieces. I don't think anything goes back with him. I think it all stays there. But do we think there's still a correlation of people turning up, not having a slot, and then just tipping it?
Well, there's always been this debate. My view is that criminal behaviour is criminal behaviour. I mean, I don't think you or I would turn up outside a house on West Recycling Centre, find it closed, and think, right, I think I'll heave this onto the verge. Then, you take it home and you go back. I think there's probably suggestions that certain things aren't allowed in. So commercial waste without a permit, trailers without pre-booking and that sort of thing might cause issues. I've heard it said that the opening times are a problem, but having said that, during the summer, Wednesdays they're open late and nobody goes, even though they advertise the fact, the slots aren't taken up. And if you ask colleagues at the county, they'll tell you now there are plenty of slots available during the day, for people to use. So it's not quite as simple, I don't think, as saying that, it's because you can't get into the tip. Clearly there's a role to play. If it was free disposal, no questions asked, you wouldn't get as much fly tipping, but I still think you'd get some. I think there's an element of criminal or antisocial behaviour that's linked to the people that fly tip that isn't solved by anything else. It's just that's the way some people choose to get rid of their waste. But we continue to work with the county council. It continues to be raised at Warwickshire Waste Partnership. And I think they will potentially move in the fullness of time to some sort of hybrid system, I suspect. But for the moment, booking slots is here to stay for at least the foreseeable future, I think.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Indeed. Has anybody got any more for Richard before we let him go off and watch EastEnders?
Oh, has EastEnders started? What am I still doing here?
You'll just make the second half. All right. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for logging on.
Yeah.
Thanks,
There you go. Okay, Julie.
Check. So one of the things that Councillor Rosling mentioned at the beginning was about Mallow, and one of the things I can report is that group has looked at the Ask for Angela campaign. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, but it was something that we thought would be a good idea to roll out within North Warwickshire, and it's been turned around quite quickly, and information's gone out to all licensed premises in the 3 main towns. It will be rolled out across the whole of North Warwickshire, and we are also looking to target taxis as well. So Environmental Health have led on that with the local SMT team. So some really good work. It's turned around quite quickly. The thing we are mindful of is that whilst all the information packs have gone out, there's posters, there's stickers. The stickers are meant to be displayed in all the premises. we have gone and done some checks and we're not seeing them so visible at the moment. So one of the things we want to do is a bit more social media campaign and then go back and revisit those establishments and see to make sure it's effective. So we got all the nods and everybody seemed very pleased and wanted to welcome it into their premises, but we're not seeing the stickers up. And that's the identity that that's a safe space, and you can ask for Angela. So we need to do a lot more work around this, but it's a good start. You know, it's been turned around very quickly and the information's gone out, so that's good. I will go through some of these very
Kerry, you've got a question? I'm just concerned that if they do have a staff member called Angela, is Angela going to be aware that she's going to get people asking for it?
Yeah, I mean, alongside all of this, there is training internally. So it will be, you know, obviously all staff should be trained, and it's a I totally get your point, but I think each licensed premises would have to look at that when if that issue.
So they can't employ Angela because it's a code word.
Yeah, and that is the campaign. It was based on something in London that occurred. So
I mean, it's a good idea.
Yeah. But I think if that issue arose, then we would have to.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, so just really quickly, and I'm sure I don't need to go into too, but I just wanted to give you a feel for what do we, you know, put out on social media, so you've got an idea about what we're. So it's just there. It's just a list of an example of things that we've promoted since the last meeting. So some stuff around catalytic converter marking. That was a free service. We did a lot of stuff around drink spiking over Christmas because we were aware of neighbouring authorities that had drink spiking going on, such as Nuneaton. So we wanted to make sure we were getting the messages out across North Warwickshire. Again, particularly around the seasonal period, we did a lot around domestic abuse, and then we did stuff, a whole mixture of campaigns, which was the county's 31 days of Christmas. So that covered literally every area. So lots of messages going out all the time, and we're happy to promote and get those messages out if people want us to look at anything specific. And then the other thing was that I noticed weren't in reports previously. I wanted to just highlight what things we do in North Warwickshire around antisocial behaviour. So what interventions do we take to address concerns? And so what I wanted to capture for you is the powers that we use so that I've done February for you, but just how many civil injunctions we have in place, how many criminal behaviour orders, just to give you a flavour for the kind of work that is taking place with our partner organisations to address antisocial behaviour. So again, I think there's more that we can be doing going forward, but it was just to give you a flavour for what does that look like? How many things are we doing? You know, what interventions are we taking? Like for example, recently there's been a lot more around acceptable behaviour contracts and things like that around young people. So and that is trying to stamp out and address some of these issues that we're having, particularly in like Arley and Hartsell. So that's just a visual aid really, just to see what we're doing around antisocial behaviour.
Okay, and just for everybody's information, you sit on the ASB group.
Yes.
And that's problem solving group and the case management group.
Yes.
And how often do you go? Is it every month?
Yes. Yeah, monthly.
Right, loads of work for Julie then. Any problems, tell Julie. We'll go from there. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Yeah, Julie, have you had any instances of the community trigger being used?
So I've only been in this role a very short period of time, but as far as I'm aware, I don't believe it has been used. I'm sure I saw some information that went back to probably the last 5 years, and I don't think that I can have a look at it. I can find out. I don't think so.
Yeah, that's obviously, it could be a good thing that it's not been used, but all people are just not aware of it as a tool.
Yeah. Let me look into that one. Let me look into that one and come back to you.
Can you explain it, because I don't know what it's about?
The community trigger is something where incidents with ASB, or it can be other crimes as well, if you get 3 or more crime numbers relating to that ASB or hate crimes, things like that, in a 6-month period, you can press what's called a metaphorical press, what's called a community trigger. So then the council, the police and all the other partner agencies, housing, if it's private housing or private landlords even, come together, and there has to be a solution, there has to be a resolution.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are just not aware of it, or it's getting dealt with in other ways that prove that it's not needed. So it's either one of those two things. Really.
Yeah.
It's a useful tool for the back pocket, isn't it? If you feel
Yeah.
that it isn't being addressed, then you can pull in the community trigger button. No, I'm not being aware of it's doing it. Okay, good. That's obviously positive feedback. And then the other bit of good news, I don't know if it's since we last met or not, you know about the High Court injunctions being back on again. Did we talk about that last meeting?
Car cruising.
Yeah, car cruising, and then obviously
Yes.
also exclusion orders for public land, etc.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few safeguards in there, but it's basically overturned the decision we had now about 18 months ago, which pretty much had said you can't have any orders against persons unknown. And so not every part of that earlier injunction has been overturned. Sorry, not every part of that earlier decision has been overturned, but the vast majority. So in principle, it's still possible, and it's just set out some sort of safeguards. So if you follow those, then you're okay. I mean, it's still a lot of work to do, but what it means is it's still a possibility in appropriate cases. So just make life a little easier again. And so we're now hoping to get on reviewing the evidence on the car cruising injunction, because we know that what we thought was a barrier isn't there anymore.
Yeah, it's one for us to watch, isn't it? Particularly with the gypsy and travel community, because there are a number of civil injunctions in Nuneaton and Bedworth that relate to traveller incursions on sites, and clearly we border with Nuneaton and Bedworth, so we're just going to have to be careful with it as we move forward through the year, that we're properly sensitive to displacement. Particularly now we're getting into the season for gatherings and out of COVID. Okay, good, Julie.
Okay, so just quickly went through the police and crime commissioner money that we have funding for. So just briefly, there was 4 projects funded. So one which was Loudmouth, which was a targeted youth education project, which was about going into schools and talking about issues around knife crime and county lines. Then there was support for the domestic abuse service. Now that's the not refuge, that is the counselling. That's the therapeutic and counselling service. So that's actually to support people who have to support their recovery following domestic abuse. And then we had Projects Fund, and then we had Safer Warwickshire Officer, which did not go ahead. Just very, very quickly, we've now, all that funding has been spent. The school project it wasn't at Hartsville in the end, but it was Queen Elizabeth School and another school. It was originally going to go into Hartsville, but I think they were funded through another area. And then the domestic abuse service obviously delivered and received, high levels of numbers. We've supported through the Emerging Trends Priorities Fund. We supported a number of different projects around catalytic converter project, and then we have used the remaining funds around crime prevention equipment to support all of our campaign works, as well as I think a little bit was spent on fly tipping as well. And then, the fly tipping money was from the Safer Warwickshire Officers post, because that was going to be an underspending that would have been clawed back. We asked for whether we were able to use that funding to buy some wildlife cameras to physically target some of our hotspots. And they asked us, and the idea is to literally bring in quite a large number of cameras to a location, and until that is dealt with in terms of addressing the issue around fly tipping in that location, they will remain there, and then they will move to the next location, and they will just circulate. We know, over time, we'll have to pay for new ones because some disappear and all of that. So just to say, so that was last year's. We've applied, I think, around the time of the last meeting, we were applying for funding to Police and Crime Commissioner for this year's projects. And I just want to quickly highlight what we've applied for. So working with the county, they were keen that we again continued the work that we were doing around school children, around the kind of county lines and knife crime. So we're going to support a serious violence mentoring project that's working with basically upskilling mentors to work with those young people, and also training people within a community to support those young people. And that's being led by Jonathan Toy at Warwickshire County Council. We again have got a pot of funding, £5,000. Again, that will be targeting our priorities. So issues that come up during the next 12 months, it just gives us some resources to address things around road safety, rural crime, acquisitive crime, violent crime, and so forth. And then the third one, which we talked about or alluded to today, is that we've actually applied for £15,000 worth of funding to appoint, whether it be appoint a person or pay for extra time of a person, to deliver some dedicated work around fear of crime. So it would be going back and revisiting the information pre-pandemic around fear of crime and the surveys that took place. It will be picking up the safer streets kind of work and looking at the surveys. And then it will be working with the parish councils and our kind of key community groups to start looking at the key ingredients that make people aware of fear of crime.
Yes, so it's our big project for this year, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's been delivered on the basis of what's now year-on-year reduction in funds coming from the Police and Crime Commissioner to all 5 of the community safety partnerships in North Warwickshire, where the PCC is now doing far more direct commissioning from his office than through local bodies. But yeah, Denise. So the idea about the Safer Communities Officer is about picking up those issues around what make people feel uneasy, what make people feel worried about crime in their areas. But importantly, it's about doing it with parish councils. So hopefully we're going to have some very engaged parish councils who want to both engage with the project, but also invest some of their precept funding in delivering local interventions. So they would very much be interventions within parish areas, but our hope is that parishes will use some of their 137 grant monies to enhance services within their areas. Now, I can't actually sit here and give you any example of what I think it's going to look like, because you'll remember that we've repeatedly tried to engage with parish councils, even offering them direct grant funding, and we've never had a great success, which is interesting. So this is taking it a step forward. This is about doing some proactivity. This is about somebody going into parish areas, being able to offer some expertise, and also hopefully a degree of project management time to deliver things and encourage all of our parishes to do their bit on community safety and on how safe people feel. So it's a different one. Please.
It's nice to know that we could be employing somebody to do the fear of crime, but I just hope that they're going to get out there amongst our public and not rely on these for statistics on that. Because going back to the egg throwing, you know, to children it's funny, but to an 8 to 4-year-old living on their own, it is a fear of crime. So I'd like you people, you know, if we're going to be doing this, to get out there where our elderly are and get their perspective of fear of crime. Because them are the ones that are sitting alone most nights, most days. So, you know, it's nice to hear that, but just don't rely on statistics coming through a computer.
Well, totally. It's, you know, I mean, we're going to have to manage it as we go forward. We're going to have to make sure we do as best as we can to get a North Warwickshire coverage. But I know I'll be certainly encouraging the parishes that I am engaged with to start engaging with this person, because, you know, if they can do local positive interventions and do some targeted work, then let's see where we go. Now, it's only 15,000, so it's not going to buy a lot of hours. But let's just see where we go, because if every parish was to chuck in 500 quid, then we end up with a...
There's plenty of things out there where the elderly come, tea and chat, lunches, over 60s club. There's all those where somebody could go out and speak to them.
Well, and you know, there are some really good things being done across North Warwickshire by some of the parishes. there's some really engagement opportunities going on, and it's about us just taking a bit of time to understand where they are and how you can have a project that you take into some of the existing structures that go on. And there are some, actually, at parish level, there's some brilliant projects going on, aren't there? I mean, I've at least done some stunning stuff over COVID.
I think there's also as much as talking to the kids and talking to the elderly people, but I think it's the parents that need speaking to. We had our recreational ground litter picked this morning, grass cut, beautiful, everything. When I walked the dog this afternoon, there was litter everywhere. So, and if the kids aren't told, then, you know, you've got 4 dustbins in a small area and they still think it's okay. Just pet hay.
Yeah, well, that's what Lee George said. You've never seen so many litter bins in one location, and you still have to do it.
Yeah, I do feel it's the parents without a doubt.
All right, well, let's spend the year working out where we go. Joe.
Just going to say, I think this could be really positive, and not just with the parish councils. If it's a positive role of kind of supporting and signposting, you know, we've got organisations like Big Local, we've got youth clubs, we've got, you know, and it's the networking between these, you know, pulling a personal knowledge of these challenging young people into the kind of the police and the parents and the family information service, and making sure that all those agencies that are out there are actually working for our communities. And the family information service, I've just discovered recently, we can all make referrals to, and they've got a massive range of support that they can put in place and to actually help families out. But it's not always signposted. And if we've got somebody in post that's knowledgeable about what's available, knowledgeable about those networks, knowledgeable not just about kind of the parish council in the area, but actually the organisations locally that can help, and knowledgeable about the families and where they need support, then I think it could be a really effective role. But I think they're going to have to hit the ground running to be effective, and know who their partners are, and know kind of that networking strategy that's in depth to actually be successful. So it's not just looking at statistics on the screen and reacting.
Totally.
It's got to be.
Totally. If they're looking at statistics on the screen, it's all gone wrong.
Yeah.
It's about getting down there. It's about understanding. It's about doing simple things, and simple things that make a big difference to people, and doing them well. So let's see where we go. And if any of you have got any of your ward funding left and you would like to buy some time for this officer in your ward, then please speak to Julie. We'll be interested in seeing how we can do it. But we're open to offers of money from anywhere, aren't we, to try and it's got to be more than just the stuff you'd expect a PCSO to do. We're not taking responsibility away from other organisations. We're providing extra capacity to do specific things. Okay, good. Right, any more for any more? No? Let's close that agenda item then. Thank you, Julie. And let's move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 7, which is page 30 of 33 in your pack, which is a progress report on the Road Safety Action Plan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so it's just a reminder, so in terms of the background of this, the Northwestern Road Safety Action Plan was agreed by the subcommittee on the 16th of March in 2016. Since then, there's been a lot of work gone on between the district and Warwickshire County Council, and particularly in the last, from what I understand, in the last kind of 12 months, there has been a lot of development in terms of the county's provision in terms of road safety. What I want to do is just make you aware of some of those things. So one thing is the adoption of the partnership strategy. So that's 2021 to 2030. The strategy will be delivered through the strategic board and the county, which is supported by an operational board. I think there's key things that there's various groups that the county have established. So there's ones around safe speeds, there's some around safe vehicles, safe roads, safe road users, and post-collision response. I think the key thing is about what they've brought in the last kind of 12 months. And since I've been in post, what I've seen is they've got a new website in place. They've got a new way to report issues around speeding within parishes, and it's meant to be a one-stage process which they prioritise. And I'll try and find links and I can send them around to everybody. And then they've also, and I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with this, but in terms of the community speed watch, they they've got a new app to support the downloading of information to improve the warning letters getting out into the community. Because I have no knowledge of this, but I'm aware that there's been delays in getting those warning letters out. So there was concern about that kind of disjoint in terms of work. So that all sounds positive in terms of some of these key kind of things that are going on. In terms of North Warwickshire, events were held in November, and Kingsbury Water Park and Atherstone Library also held an event. And then there's been 3 days of action in January. From the January event, 59 warnings were given, 1 motorcycle and 1 car was seized for having no insurance, and 2 stolen motorcycles were recovered. So it was a fairly positive campaign in January, just in this location, and clearly that needs to be repeated on an ongoing basis. What I'm also aware of is there's been various road improvements. They've recently finished some road improvements on Blythe Road in Coleshill, which also included resurfacing, improvements to the safety barriers, and improved signage to address the loss of control incidents. And then we've seen various road improvements around average speed cameras and the way in which roads are laid out. So we've got stuff with traffic light signals and T-junctions. So there's various things going on within the county. I'm not so involved with that, but I can take any questions about that and follow those up. So I'm not actually attending any meetings actually on those actual changes to the roads. In terms of North Warwickshire plan update, again, you know, one of the key things is there was no fatal incidences in Q3 on the data that I received. So noting that Councillor Wiley said he's aware of one, so I need to look into that. I just also want to make you aware that there's 15 active community speed watch schemes in North Warwickshire. And again, I'm just trying to get a little bit more detail about how do we support them, where are they all located, so we can be a bit more proactive within North Warwickshire. We've already talked about the street cruising in Junction, so that was one of the key actions that we're picking up again. And then I'm aware of some environmental changes that have been provided in New Arley to deter access to land where there's been issues around nuisance motorcycles.
We got a fence and they're broken.
Oh no.
It's ongoing.
It's ongoing.
It's appreciated, but
so maybe there's some more work that needs to be done around that. So if there's any questions on road safety, I think the primary things at the moment is around the website, the reporting of speed watches, and the updates around the community groups. I can't think what they're called.
Kerry.
Yeah, can I just ask that we look at, obviously not tonight, but a separate statistic, and that is, it's been discussed in the parish council a number of times, and that is Whitford Lane Junction as one. The fact that nobody's been killed there for 4 years or 5 years means that the highway is not going to do anything about it. Now, the problem is, we all know there have been many accidents there. It's the worst, one of the top 5 worst junctions in the whole North Warwickshire, or Warwickshire even. And there needs to be another statistic out there which shows the interruption to traffic, because when there's even a minor accident there, it shuts down the whole A5 around Atherstone for hours or even a day. It has been at times. And some days there's 3 accidents there in a day. Now, I'm not just talking about that junction, I'm talking about the statistic. We are looking at motor vehicle safety is huge now, that people don't die from accidents anymore. They don't even necessarily get injured, but the impact on everybody else's life is huge. I mean, sure, there are people who are getting hurt, but it's not as serious as it ever used to be. Whereas now the impact is on what happens to that traffic when it has to get diverted away from that area, what villages is it going through, and the ongoing impact and the delays caused. If you hit a railway bridge, that railway track is closed until an investigation has been done. It's a similar thing. but it also involves direct human cost.
Okay, well, listen, that's a really, really, really good point. You can have best point medal for tonight. I'll tell you why it's timely as well, is because County Council have been in contact and they want to relaunch the work that they shelved 3 years ago about North Warwickshire transport strategy. So there will be a member of the Conservative group, a member of the Labour group being on that working party. And we need to dust that off, and we need to make sure that we again flag the importance of road safety in North Warwickshire in that strategy. Second one is that there's work starting on the economic strategy.
Yep.
And we need to make sure that we cross-cut the road safety and the business disruption elements around gridlock and accidents, and as you say, damage to key road infrastructure. But it just does, particularly with our North Warwickshire economy being so distribution orientated at the moment. So yeah, really good. I'll pick those up and make sure that they go in both the strategies. If you can just remind me of that, Julie.
Yeah.
And we'll do that. Joe?
I have my usual rant that all these things are brilliant, but at the end of the day, and this is again quoting Warwickshire County Highways officers to say that when they did the speed testing on Anstey Common after Harley's death, they've come back and said that it's a mean compliant road, and they have 100 such roads in the county and only funding to do anything about 3 of them. We've since got hold of the speed data. Only 38% of people actually follow the speed limit or below on that road, with 50% being prosecutable illegally over. So, that's the law of averages, isn't it? 50% are going to be above, 50% are going to be below. But 22 vehicles went down Anstey Common in that week at over 70 miles an hour, with the top speed of 95 miles an hour. And none of these things, none of the incentives that we see are going to fix that. The only way to fix it is either the infrastructure on the road or enforcement. And it's just, we have to change those dangerous statistics. I think that 95 miles an hour was at 9 o'clock at night. It wasn't at 3 in the morning or stupid times. And that's only because a child was killed. But we've even got that data to be able to look at it objectively and say, this is the problem. And community speed watch at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the kids are there is brilliant, but it's not going to fix this. The only way to fix this is by having some serious enforcement or average speed cameras along these stretches of our roads.
Okay, so a couple of 3 issues. Let's not forget that the Warwickshire Safer Roads Partnership, DCC, is putting 500,000 into it every year. Historically, the County Council Highways contribution for killed and serious injury accidents out of a £450 million a year budget was £187,000 a year. So these matters have got to go back to the Warwickshire Road Safety Partnership, where there is money to do local interventions, and particularly the community championing and community pressure should make people sit up and listen, not least the PCC. He is committed to reducing KSIs. It's in his policing plan, and he hangs his mask to it. So if you want to flag anybody, flag him, because he chairs the strategic body. And we should be doing something about vehicles travelling at over 30 miles an hour during evenings, because as you quite rightly say, they are dangerous projects. I'm also minded of the fact that there, Dave, that County Council have £8.2 million worth of HS2 funding for road safety interventions, and the only project I'm aware of that they're paying for in North Warwickshire using that funding, which is a bit of a cheek, is Coleshill Crossroads, when really that was originally funded through Core Road Safety Grant, through Core Highways Grant at County Council. So if you are aware of dangerous locations, come on, let's pick them up and let's flag them, and if nothing else, let's just be a proverbial pain in the butt things and challenge people, because we all know that there are too many meetings that go on where people are too comfortable and nod things through. And let's stop it happening, because there are people being killed and seriously injured in North Warwickshire. Got Denise and I've got Dave.
Thank you, Chair. 5.1, the Safer Neighbourhoods team. I was going to take this up with Julie after this meeting, and I still can. It's about the speed watch operation. Manchester now have been waiting an average of 3 years, obviously probably 18 months of that out of COVID, and we're still nowhere. We actually, when Robert Beggs was here and they put in for funding from the Crime Commissioners Fund. Manchester was part of that funding to get cameras, to get the speed awareness guns. That never happened. Then we was told that an officer was stationed at Coastal, which was going to be the coordinator to be trained. That never happened. And now they're still waiting. And Jodie's point of, you know, having these statistics, even at that time of the day, may help the campaign that me and Margaret's doing at the minute with the speeding on Manchester Road and Harper's Lane, where we've had 2 deaths. We had a meeting with the county council the other day, and I'm sorry to say it's like pulling teeth. So even if we can get this up and running, you know, just to get us some more statistics of what we're after, would be grateful.
Okay, and the one thing that we know is that we can get the mobile speed camera van into North Warwickshire. So he's been 3 occasions to my knowledge, because I've physically seen him, and I've also talked to somebody that was very upset that they got caught speeding on the way to Morrison's to buy bread, and then they got caught speeding on the way back. So that loaf cost 2 fines. Anyway, Dave.
Thanks for letting me speak. I'm pleased to hear that there's 15 speed watch groups. I am concerned about what Denise has just said, because I know that in Newton Regis had the same problem. They want a speed watch group, but he's got to be the unluckiest officer in the Warwickshire Police in the world. He had COVID, there was a major sickness in the family, and look, it went on and on and on. It's gone on for a couple of years. But one thing I have seen, Shuttington spent another 2 or 3 years getting round to getting a speed watch. They've got a camera. Their camera's up for sale now because there's nobody interested in doing it. How do we make sure that we can continue? Because it relies on volunteers. How do we keep volunteer willingness to keep going? And what do the police do anything about it at all? Because you know, the rural roads is where it's all happening. I'm surprised. I have tried since I've been a county councillor to get the camera ban up for Longley. We've not been able to get in there yet. And there's 30 accidents in the last 2 months there. Nobody killed, nobody seriously injured. Ambulances have arrived. Most of the cars involved in it have been taken away on lorries. Still can't get what we need to happen there. So I tried to get the cameraman there, and Alison said she would do what she could. It still hasn't come, and that's the best part of a year now that we've not been able to do it. So I also think, to a certain extent, the police pay lip service to it as well. They don't actually give us the service that we need. I don't know, we can chase it up from your committee.
Okay, well, we know that Longley is the most dangerous junction anywhere in the whole of Warwickshire on the crossroads. So I'm amazed, Dave, if they can't put the camera down.
I'm going to be able to get there this year.
Right, well, Julie, me and you'll pick that up and we'll go forward with that one. And then you were going to say something, Julie, about the community speed watch and perhaps a review of where we have live programs. So I'm just conscious, if there's a camera for sale, well, the partnership bought a number of cameras. Yeah. So we just need to make sure that nobody's selling partnership.
I believe, sorry to cut across you there, but I do believe the parish paid for it, which is one of the reasons it took so long.
Okay, we just need to make sure that we've had problems before where North Warwickshire has bought equipment, and then the last occasion it was the police that decided to dispose of, well, they relocated it. Well, I've got your head, Dave.
Yeah, so I'm just jumping up and down at the statement that the parish paid for it. It was paid for as a result of a...
You may have paid for it out of your fund.
And actually, I don't think they should be selling it. If there's
no, well, they put it off sale.
Well, I don't think they should be. I think that's morally wrong. They received it as a result of a grant. I think if they're not using it, I think they should be passing it on to a council that can...
All right, well, let's bring the whole issue of Speedwatch back to the next meeting. Yeah. And we'll have a review. We'll see where there are live campaigns. We'll see where there is equipment, and nobody should be disposing of any equipment which has either been bought through council grant or bought through funding from this body. It's property belongs to us.
Could I just add, Chair, I'm really pleased that the mobile vans are being seen in North Warwickshire. As you know, I've been you're talking about that for some considerable time. And
we don't on Sundays, that's when I use my bike.
Well, last time I saw him, he was outside Middleton Hall, just tucked away by the entrance to Middleton Hall. I was coming back from Tamworth, thank God I saw him. 50 miles
Still
an
like
hour.
to see them in the villages, but you know, at least it's a move. Yeah.
Okay. Right, Julie, you got anything else to say about Community Speed Watch?
No, just that I will follow up on all of that, and you know, as far as I was aware, and obviously fairly new, that I believe there was somebody imposed, and yeah, so I will definitely follow up and raise some of these concerns.
Okay, well, I think it's a really good item for us to look at in some detail at the next meeting, and I'll tell you why, because the constant factor that has proved a challenge has been Warwickshire Police and their approval of locations, their assessment of locations, the constant changing of the police lead. So while we've had lots and lots of goodwill from local groups, some of them have to be really tenacious to keep themselves going. Okay, right. Any more for any more? No, can I just say thank you much indeed. I mean, it is really good attendance tonight. I know that we've got more people here than are on the committee, so thank you to those that have come in anyway. If there's something you think we should be doing, then for goodness sake, give Julie loads of work. Yeah. Perfectly pleasant about it. Thank you, everybody.